This is the National Association of State Chief Administrators, our top 10 monthly event. Each month, we come together as a community to discuss pressing issues around state chief administrators and their teams. And this is all built around our top 10 priorities for our state chief administrators. And this month, we're going to be focusing on data management, data-driven decisions, and a really interesting angle today, thinking about sustainability and looking at opportunities for utilizing sustainable processes in data management and analytics. We've got a wonderful group that will be with us here today to discuss the conversation and really bring some very unique insights. We have two of our state members with us today, along with Amazon Business, one of our corporate council members who will come and share some of the processes that they use to assist states. And again, really thinking about the use of sustainability and social responsibility tools in the context of a data-driven environment, especially as we're looking at strategic goals and outcomes. Before we get too far into the conversation today, I do want to ask everyone to make sure that you go in, rename yourself. If you don't have your name already listed with Zoom, let us know your name and your state, where you're coming in from. Drop any information you'd like to in chat. If you've got a LinkedIn address you'd like to drop in there, we'd love to connect with you there, or a Twitter handle. Join us on social media there. Also, please utilize the chat today to ask any questions that you might like of our speakers. We want this to be highly interactive and engaging, an opportunity to really just pick the brains of all of our panelists that are here with us today. Before we start though with our panelists, we love to use the first part of our hour to gauge what's happening in our states. So Tammy, would you please bring up our first poll? Here's our first poll question today. Is the creation of sustainable or long-lasting systems something your office is considering, or is this a topic that's part of your role in data management? 4 options here for you to think through. Yes, we've discussed the need, but really not taken major steps in this area. Or the second option, this is a large part of my daily activities and my role. Third option, large part of my daily role, and we have at least one major initiative underway. Or the fourth option here, not really related to my role, but others under my purview or those I work with are dealing with this issue in data management. So we would love to see you cast your vote again as we're thinking around sustainable, long-lasting systems. Is this something that is underway as an initiative in your particular state, agency, or department? Take just a second and respond to one of these 4 questions. So Tammy, will you show us our results? What are we looking at today? Okay, interesting. Not many are saying it's a large part of your job, but others under your purview or those you work with are working here on this topic. Very interesting. Be helpful for our panelists to hear that today. So let's move on to our second quick poll question. Then I'll be glad to introduce our speakers that we have today. So Tammy, would you mind please showing us our second poll question? So again, as we're thinking about data management and analytics, do you consider that to be a large part or any part of customer service? Again, 4 options. Yes, this is very critical to good customer service. Yes, but not the whole picture as we look at customer service. Third option, no, we're taking other citizen-centric approaches to customer service. Or the fourth one, not right now, but we might consider it as one aspect of customer service as we look to the future. So again, we're talking about data management and analytics, the connection to customer service, citizen-centric processes. Take, again, just a moment to respond to one of the 4 questions there. All right, Tammy, let's see what this question is showing us today. Oh, pretty close on the very first 2. So yes, critical to good customer service, but also maybe not the whole picture when we're talking about how we craft that entire overall citizen-centric, customer-focused process. Well, thank you all for taking just a moment to respond to those 2 poll questions. Let's jump right into today's conversation. I have 4 amazing panelists I am thrilled to announce and introduce to you today. We have Anthony Jenkins with Amazon Business, Samantha Kochman from Amazon Business. We have Secretary Todd Inman from the Florida Department of Management Services, and also Chief Information Officer Josh Spence from the West Virginia Office of Technology. So each of our speakers is going to take a few moments to share some information, either from the processes that they're working on at the corporate level or at the state level. And then we're going to have an opportunity to just kind of learn from each other. And again, we would love to see your questions in the chat, what you'd like to pose to any of the panelists, and we'll be certainly and have that opportunity to share with them. So Anthony, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, kicking off our conversation today, really helping us think through what is a sustainable process? What does that look like when we're talking about the overall connection to good data? So Anthony, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Pam. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for your time this afternoon. My name is Anthony Jenkins with Amazon Business, and my purpose today is to get some conversation going around how you use data, especially around your sustainability and social responsibility initiatives. And so my goal today isn't necessarily to focus on Amazon Business, but rather have a discussion around what tools you may be using and what goals you may be setting. One of the things that may be helpful to talk about right away, though, is when you hear the word sustainability, that means different things to different organizations and to different people. Ultimately, in my opinion, sustainability means efficiency, but that can be gained in a lot of different ways. A lot of people think about just the environmental aspects of sustainability. Some people put their small and diversity efforts and lump that under a sustainable umbrella. Some other synonyms for this that you may hear, I've written a few down: corporate social responsibility, environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG, sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I. All of these things sometimes are wrapped up in there when we say this. And so one of the things that I wanted to discuss today is, as different state organizations, what does sustainability mean to you? And what types of goals and initiatives do you see from the governor and cabinet level that's pushed on down? So feel free to drop responses in the chat, because I'd love to incorporate those into some of our discussion as we move along, because it does mean something different to everybody, but I think there's some unifying factors that we can focus on as we go through that. One of the things that I wanted to touch on early on, though, is just to give a little bit of insight into us as Amazon Business. We work with many of the different state organizations, and wanted to just share some of the trends or best practices that we see from customers who do have these sustainability or social responsibility goals and efforts. So if it's okay, I want to just share my screen briefly. And based on the feedback that we've received from many of our state government customers, we've tried to build out tools. And this isn't necessarily unique to Amazon Business. More and more customers or suppliers that you buy from are going to be heading in this direction and providing this type of data as well. But I'll just skip down to these three icons down here. Some of the key things that we've heard from state government is they want to promote local businesses. So maybe it's buying from businesses within their state boundaries or in rural areas or underserved areas, but targeting specific local businesses. The other thing that we've heard is to make purchasing more sustainable. And that can mean buying products that last longer, so you don't have to replenish them as much. It could be receiving them from electric vehicle deliveries to improve air quality. It can mean a lot of different things there with making purchasing more sustainable. And then the last one, not the last thing that we've heard, but one of the other key pillars that we hear is increasing supplier diversity. And so most states know that you can't have a direct contracting relationship with every single small business in your state. But there are opportunities through e-marketplaces or subcontracting plans where you can reach more of those diverse suppliers and finding ways to interact with them. So those are some of the key things that we're seeing. And just to put out a use case, some of the states that I've worked with in my capacity at Amazon Business, we've seen them set different goals and share those with us to say, we would love for 20% of our purchases on Amazon Business to go to small and diverse sellers, or for 50% of our orders to be from climate pledge friendly products or sustainable products. once they share goals with us, we can set up tools to help them try to obtain those different levels that they're going for. So without going too far into the details here, I did want to open it up and ask our other panelists, what are some of the different things that you and your states and organizations have heard from governor and cabinet levels as far as sustainability, and how do your states view sustainability and social responsibility?
Secretary Inman, are you able to share a little bit about what's happening there in Florida?
Yeah, we were just making sure we were in. My apologies. Ironically, for a tech discussion, there were some tech issues trying to get into the panelist room. So it's a pleasure to be with you. Pleasure to have an opportunity. I mean, I'll be happy to touch on it in a little bit. I know once we hear the rest of the presentation, it may be a better opportunity. But I can say this from our side of the field, which is in my agency, we're very lucky to not only have the state contracting that occurs, but we also have an Office of Supplier Diversity that has made great grounds in the last several years. In fact, in the last year alone, we've added 1,500 new veteran-owned businesses alone into our network. And because we utilize our own proprietary network called My Florida Marketplace, we're able to do outreach in conjunction with our other partners throughout the entire state. So I never want to say that you can't coordinate with every one of your small or disadvantaged businesses, because a lot of that it's just a matter of the outreach and how you make the process and systems easier. I can tell you it is obviously a challenge sometimes, especially for small and disadvantaged businesses, to understand how to access state government. So part of our role is not only education, but communication and outreach. And that's where we try to work with partners in a lot of different areas, because the Byzantine nature of state purchasing and contracting can be very overwhelming if you aren't able to break it up into small digestible pieces, especially for small entrepreneurs who are just struggling to not only make the payroll, but to do the job at the same time. So we're renewing emphasis on that, not just in the digital spectrum, but just in purchasing in general.
Follow up there. How do you, as the state of Florida, you've got your own system, it sounds like that you use to do outreach, which is great. How do you view the federal standards for different small businesses, like from sam.gov? Are those things that are honored there, or do you have unique setup of Florida requirements for what constitutes a small business?
Well, small businesses can be defined in a lot of different areas. I mean, you have some Census Bureau that defines some of that. A small business is a business that probably thinks that they're small and wants to be bigger. So we actually have a small business administration that runs outreach through that portion of it, and as they work through our employer management and other groups and agencies. So I don't want to put a caveat, because we work on so many different spectrums from small to disadvantaged. So it's generally a greater opportunity to really look at how you're doing. And that's one of the things we like to do with analytics and being able to benchmark. One of the areas, we have a strategic planning office that does nothing but automation and systems and tries to basically give us better dashboards and data so that we understand not only what type of job we're doing, but how we're doing relative to the universe that we're trying to impact.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I know that both you and CIO Spence have worked to modernize and implement sustainable and valuable mechanisms for data gathering and management and all of that, which goes beyond just the purchasing. But yeah, feel free to share anything from the Florida standpoint, and then also West Virginia as far as what you're doing in those areas.
Josh, I'll leave it to you for a minute. You've got the CIO portion over there.
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about from a CIO perspective when it comes to this moving forward. I think data is going to be at center, right? We know that that's what's driving the world, and data-driven decisions help ensure we see things from a perspective that the data indicates, and not just necessarily from our own perspective. And that, right, because that's how we view the world, from the lens by which we perceive what is around us. So data is a key component of this, because it can help us look at situations in a way where we might not realize aspects that are in play. So In West Virginia, we're working toward a data strategy within state government to ensure we're sharing data between the government entities where we should be, so that we can provide better services. And I think that in turn will help lead along paths of sustainability and moving that forward also.
Pam, I'll just touch on one more thing from the Amazon side, and then if you want to move us in another direction, happy to go that way. But some of the other things that we've heard from not just data management, but just the data that we receive, is that it's important to be able to know what's been purchased and from whom, and what different certifications and criteria it may have. So some of the things that we've been working to do at Amazon Business are to make it easy to find those types of sellers. So whether it's climate pledge friendly or sustainable products, or buying from specific types of sellers. So for example, hub zone sellers, or women-owned small businesses, or Secretary Inman, I believe you mentioned veteran-owned small businesses have been a big push for you. So just being able to find those types of sellers, I think, is really important to connect the buying and the selling community, because they have shared goals in many cases. So my colleague, Sam Kochman, she's worked closely with some of the seller communities and making sure that we try to make them as discoverable as possible. And then also when purchases are made, that information is surfaced so that states can do with that what they would like. So Sam, if you have anything you wanted to touch on, feel free.
Just a quick update on what we're trying to do to help advance the data piece around certification. So as I'm sure many of you know, the vast majority of addressable, certifiable businesses in this country, small, diverse, veteran-owned, women-owned, whichever category, the vast majority are not actually certified. So whether they don't know about state and national certifications, or it's been a financially burdensome process, time intensive, all these reasons, we're really trying to find easier, more convenient, cheaper, more available ways for suppliers to get certified, specifically larger categories nationally right now, but working with some states specifically to get important state certs live. So please reach out if you want to hear more about that offline. But it's important to note that all of these things that we're doing, trying to increase our certified suppliers on Amazon Business, this is all scalable outside of AB. These are not Amazon specific certifications. And we really find it's important for relationships and the future success of these suppliers to make sure that they can get certified and work through whichever state and national procurement systems, like My Florida Marketplace. Perhaps that will have a certified filter in the future, or it does now, but making sure that they can leverage these more convenient and more accessible certifications and actually use them to increase procurement in many avenues. I'll pause there. I see there's some questions.
Sam, I'm not seeing a question at the moment, but if you do, please.
Oh, looks like a direct message to me, maybe. It says, can you get into the difficulty of gathering data and analytics, etc.? They have a lot to share there. Let's see. So I'm not, is this a specific question for me, Laura?
Yes, I was thinking if possible, you could cover a little bit about that. I know
Sure.
Our members are really anxious to hear about just what you mentioned, Sam, when we had our initial chat about this call. You mentioned something really interesting about the difficulties you encountered. If you could just touch briefly on that.
So the biggest difficulty is that sellers are not necessarily certified. So in terms of actually logging the data and getting that clean data, it's only going to come through as clean and reportable if there's a certified offer behind it. And that's one of the things we're really working on, as well as I'm not sure if this is the right avenue, but getting, this is very specific to Amazon Business, getting punch out systems updated with specific seller data, that kind of stuff, so that we can help scale outside. But I don't want to focus too much on AB specifically with data issues. But if you want an AB pitch, I can give it to you.
That's helpful, Sam. And I think I would love to hear from our two state panelists as well, maybe share what they're seeing. And I want to turn back to Secretary Inman. Todd, if we may, you mentioned a couple of things when you were first opening, talking about Florida Marketplace and also the data dashboards. I know many of your colleagues here on the call are very interested in knowing how Florida is approaching the data system. Talk to us a little bit about, would you consider data still being housed in legacy systems? Are you all looking to update some of those? And really, how are you creating some of those data dashboards?
So right now, I would not say that we're looking for data dashboards as much as we are really working on the data catalog. As Governor DeSantis implemented in 2020 an entire new initiative to create what we call the Florida Digital Service that is housed under the Department of Management Services, we're taking a whole new approach of not only data cataloging, but enterprise architecture, in addition to content delivery network, cybersecurity, a vast array of things. What we are finding, and we may be like some states, but a little bit different in some respects, and I'll give you a good example of why. In our newest state workforce report that will come out, which will cover 2019 to 2020, Florida has the absolute lowest ratio of state employees to population. It's almost by half of what the number of the average for all other states. What that indicates is that while we operate with a lot less people, we do a lot more outsourcing on not only contracting, but our systems, our automation, and our processes. So part of the role for our agency is not just implementing a dashboard per se, but managing the contents in the contracts that go through them, and then finding out ways to integrate that into a reliable system. So we're taking on a momentous task in regard to rewriting some of the rules. We've had new authorization and legislation. We're starting to work with our state purchasing partners, who also are housed under the Department of Management Service, of how we not only look at procurement, which is the acquisition of the product, but then how the product is being used. Because for a very long period of time, there was not a centralized area except for in our state data center, which was basically the server farm. We've now started to implement a cloud-first initiative across all agencies, but Florida historically has not looked to leverage the buying power of basically the fourth largest economy in the world, if you want to call it. But we are now starting to turn that attention to how we can use that scale without being a truly top-down command and control, still allowing flexibility within the agencies that we serve, and allowing some of the autonomy that's necessary as we work through legacy systems, work through issues. So it is it's an ever-evolving process, but it's aspirational as we go through each step, but it will be iterative, because as everyone's probably on this call knows, the status of tech and technology and data is ever changing. It's becoming massive in not only the scale, but the scope and where it's touching. We're literally going to come out in the next few weeks with some new rules regarding unmanned aerial systems that falls not only under our category because of the state purchasing area, but separately because of basically the interconnectivity of how the data that's being fed from drones can be used. So it touches in so many different parts of our life. We're actually now having a discussion on how we fold in building automation and systems as we look to automate most of our, basically our pool. We have 6.5 million square feet in our direct control, 6.5 million that we lease. On those that we control, we have started a process of trying to get into building automations and systems. That separately has an IT and data component. We use the Trariga system. As we try to implement that further, we have to search for vulnerabilities and opportunities. So we're on the cusp of having a lot more things to do, which is good. But will we ever actually get ahead of it? I don't believe so. The pace of evolution is happening too quick. So we have to find a nimble and basically a system that we don't bind ourselves into 5 and 10-year contracts or legacy systems that we're trying to create, but that how we can try to leverage things across all the enterprise to make it as flexible, nimble, and agile as possible in response to the consumer's needs. Just as we saw in the pandemic a couple of years ago, we had to literally reset a lot of our systems.
And remind us, if you will, for those colleagues on the call, in Florida, are you a completely centralized association so that you do have enterprise-wide control over all the data management systems?
I would say no. I would say the legislation that's been implemented is indicating that we are to write an enterprise architecture rule, which we are in the middle of rulemaking for. So there's a lot of disparity of systems, because as you look at the agencies we directly affect, about 98,000 employees, over 32 agencies in the state personnel system. Whenever you look at state universities and colleges, which also can fall under the purview of the legislature, that downstream effect we do not have oversight over, we do not have control over, nor responsibility. So there's opportunities, as people say, a rising tide brings up all ships. The better we are doing in our area, the better we have a downstream effect for people that can learn from us. But we do not have a centralized network. We have centralized authorities in some areas. And as we try to mesh not only the state purchasing division under the Department of Management Services, we have the delivery method under regulation and rule. We actually provide the telecom for all state funded organizations, and that would be universities, along with the data network delivery. So we have basically a sole source internet provider for all the nonprofits and public universities. It's called My Florida Network 2, but that does not have a cyber or resiliency aspect to it. So we're trying to blend a lot of different silos to get to one resilient organization that, as I said, adaptable and nimble. And it's a little bit different than other state systems that we've been trying to evaluate, where they may have already consolidated or they look to bring together under different agencies. The vast scope and size of Florida, not only from geography, but the number of users, requires a little bit longer tail, if you will, to try to implement some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the scope and the size of the state definitely plays into part of this conversation. You raised something earlier I thought was very interesting. And again, I know those on the call would be interested to hear your perspective. Are we ever going to catch up? Probably not. But then you add in, as you mentioned, the vulnerabilities, the risk, and now we drop cybersecurity on top of all of this. How is Florida going about really ensuring as low a risk with the highest risk mitigation? What are you putting in place to do your best to protect that data?
Well, as a state, not only the Governor DeSantis has a priority to make sure we're protecting the areas that we can, the vulnerabilities. The legislature has a significant interest. I don't want to define what we're doing, because we also have a cybersecurity task force that was set up as an initial step about 1.5 years ago as an advisory council that came up with some items that we redacted from public view, because if we talk about our vulnerabilities, it's giving someone a pathway or keys to the house, so to speak. I can say that we have some great individuals that have organized and come together and coalesced around what our significant priorities are. But the first thing you have to do is get your data catalog, because you have to know what's out there. And then the rulemaking process that we're in right now, as far as the enterprise architecture, allows for us to get more specific into different areas so that we have more of a better operating procedure and manual, so that agencies will better understand how to evaluate. So some of it is discovery right now. Some of it is, I use a phrase sometimes we talk about whack-a-mole. If you constantly are just trying to beat back one area, you're always looking for where the next vulnerability may be. It is a very challenging task. The federal government, as you can see, with all of its might and its capabilities, is not able to get ahead of that as well. We saw an issue, just 2 days ago, one of our vendors, and had to do with smart sheets and others, where a lot of our automation processes were just stopped because of not a cyber issue, but a technical issue. So we've got to make sure that we're continuing to provide the services that are required with having redundant operations. And so you're trying to build the airplane a little bit as you're flying it, if that makes sense. But we're taking it one bite at a time.
And I certainly don't think Florida is the only state that experienced this, but I believe it was just yesterday where there was a large outage um, of some cyber availability. And as a consumer of your good state this week, it impacted me as someone who was here in the state, and you know, particular things were down, and it was a challenge for the state as a whole. Let me bring Josh in, if I may, CIO Spence from West Virginia. And I would really love to hear how West Virginia is addressing some of these issues as well. So Josh, you want to share a little bit about how the governor's office and the work that you all are doing is impacting the overall data management strategy there in the state?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're seeing with technology as a whole is a shift in some responsibilities. There's the technology back end, or the behind the scenes that everybody used to have their own IT staff to perform. And then a lot of times too, you'd see IT staff supporting users from hey, my printer's not working, my monitor's not working, whatever it may be. But with technology now, we're putting a lot more capability not to maintain the systems, but to leverage the systems. And I think that's a big shift that's really important to understand. We're expecting any employee to be able to have far more understanding of the technology at their fingertips and to be able to leverage it to bring benefit in what they do than what we have in the past. And I think that's the strategy moving forward here in West Virginia is central IT enables for the agencies to leverage. And we want to continue to push that moving forward, because that's where the value is going to be, right? We've already talked a little bit about automation, right? And you're going to see continued automation of different functions in government and in the private sector. They're going to continue. So what are the employees going to do? Well, we need employees to do stuff that requires more thought, that requires more creative thought. And they're going to want to, and part of that's going to be the interface with those technologies. So you're going to see a lot of upskill. And I think from a sustainability perspective, we've got to take that into account from sustaining the workforce itself. We need to use data to make sure we're understanding the workforce, their needs, their ways to train them, ways to engage them, because it is going to change. So those are some areas we're looking at. And then I think to also comment, because you brought up the security piece, I think that's another element, right? Because if we're creating sustainable government services for citizens, and there's an interruption in that service, well, that can be very impactful. And cybersecurity is a reason why that, from a cyber threat could be a reason why that service is not available. So you used the right word. We're all about managing the risk here in West Virginia. We actually passed a law a few years ago to put cybersecurity on the foundation of cyber risk. And I always like to trumpet that a little bit, because in my previous role as the state CISO, the number one question you're going to get from a cybersecurity perspective a lot of times is, are we secure? But it's the wrong question to ask. And I illustrate that by saying, pretend I'm the fire marshal and ask me if the building's fireproof. We readily recognize most buildings aren't built to be fireproof standards, but there's a risk of fire. So what do? We put preventive measures in, we put responsive measures in. Cybersecurity is no different, and it's not a problem to be solved in the sense that we can throw some money at it and forget about it. It's here to stay, and we're going to have to manage that risk. And it's a component to that sustainability, and then also that kind of ties into resiliency.
Yeah, and if I can, Josh makes a great point in the fact that the workforce, as we see it in today's environment, if you look at workforce numbers across the entire nation, in fact, the entire world, it's not just the great resignation, it's the new fulfillment model. And as the number of jobs in IT grow, 1.3 million new IT jobs created in the last year alone, it really creates a profound new need to have that flexibility and to be able to get the right people that are upskilled, but that are flexible enough. Because state governments and government in general is typically has been viewed, I should say, in the past as a legacy type employer. Whenever you look at coming for a number of years, several years ago, it's not this way now, but several years ago, our average age or average amount of tenure of every person who left state government was 7.8 years. Now, a lot of people that are coming in and being employed today are thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be there 7 months, much less 7 years. and they're looking for that next challenge. And how do you continue to provide the ability for people to grow organically and to be able to grow in their positions while staying on top of the changing technology? And that's the reason why we, as I mentioned earlier, are looking a lot more at how we have contract managers, how we have procurement managers. We're having to find people that are able to speak that language, that are able to manage other teams that may be shifting in and out through the contract and procurement systems.
Well, and I would love to bring Josh back on, and go ahead and Tammy, if you don't mind, Anthony and Sam as well. I think this is going to be a great conversation too. And Josh, you really raised the issue of the workforce, and I think we have seen with the pandemic, everything shifted. And although we thought we would be in a very different situation, now 21 months later, we're not. So how have in the States, and then I'd again love to hear from Anthony and Sam both, really, how have things evolved around data, knowing that we have a remote or a hybrid workforce? People are at home, the risk has got to be higher, we don't have the levels of security. How are you all dealing with that at the state? And then again, maybe from AB, what are you all seeing as part of changing of that process for long-term success with that hybrid or remote workforce? So Josh, let me start with you and then we'll go Todd to you next.
Yeah, I think the workforce is a key piece to this, right? Because you're still going to need people to manage the systems that are put in place to leverage those. And so we've got to take care of that workforce. And although we've seen some benefits, I think what we found is we obviously, like everybody else, sent everybody home, and there was a question, can it be done? Well, no doubt about it, it could be done. We were able to do it, leveraging technology. I think it accelerated our adoption of technology by multiple years. I hope the pendulum does not swing back the other way, because this is the direction we absolutely need to go, is to better leverage technology. But there's some negatives to it. It's harder to maybe maintain team identity when you only ever meet on a digital platform. So that's one of the challenges we're looking at, is how do we engage staff in a way to where they still feel like they're a part of a team and they know their teammates. So one of the examples of what we're looking at is, could we, instead of bringing them in just to say they were in the office to do their job, if they're able to do it from home, let them do that from home if it makes sense, but bring them in and do a team building, do a development, do an upskill workshop with them. So that's an example of something we're looking at to manage that challenge that we now have with the remote workforce.
Absolutely, and I would echo the fact, my previous role prior to coming to this agency, I was in the federal government. And what would typically be a 4 to 5, 6 year rulemaking process, we were modifying rules sometimes in 3 and 4 weeks to make sure that we kept the logistics network of transportation system of America up and running last year. Simple modifications, but things people would never think about, whether it's donning and doffing an oxygen masks, should still be illustrated on the plane, would typically take 2 years of comments, and we just rewrote the rule out of necessity. I can't imagine 2 years ago, some people may have imagined it being reality, that today there's being introduced a completely digital driver's license that could be offered through some platforms, and how that would integrate. It's also shown us separately, and the Amazon folks could probably speak to this, of how crucial some of these supply chain networks and reliability and customer service expectations are. Vendors that we would typically be able to talk to be able to bring in equipment on same day or next day, or even labor and construction projects, because with the American Rescue Plan dollars that are flowing through, we're now seeing a much greater self-caused inflation on the labor force, but also the delivery of that labor. And it's pulling down some of our technology needs, if you will, because we're having to basically reallocate some of our people and some of our projects as we look in construction and look at how we're wiring buildings now, and how we're looking at. I was having a discussion with a CIO from another agency a few hours ago, where we're now considering not putting data ports in a building that we're getting ready to bring down to the studs. Literally no data ports, and that would be to go to a 5G ultra wide low band delivery method, which would allow more flexibility in the workforce, more hoteling options. But just getting that equipment from some of the major suppliers we're being told could be 6 months to a year. Then to get the people to install that, to allow the advent of that technology, could be another 6 months to a year, because the same electricians that would typically be wiring some of the hard wiring for that 5G ultra wide low band are the same ones that are now being pulled off with potential EV charging stations that are coming out of this bill. So there's a push and pull. It's not just in technology, it's happening in the world. It's in the delivery network, it's in the logistics side, it's the materials. So we're trying to you know, if you put your finger on one part of the scale, how far does it move the other? So it's a slow, gradual progress, where the last 2 years has shown, when forced, government can be agile. But right now, the pressure is not as hard as it was at the start of the pandemic. So we're getting a little breathing room. But as Josh says, we hope that we don't forget the lessons that we learned of how we can adapt very quickly.
Absolutely. So again, Anthony and Sam, I'd love to hear from you. How do these part of the conversation kind of concepts tie back into sustainability as it relates to customer service?
Yeah, well, even higher level, I would just say with the pandemic, I think obviously supply chain issues and data were key for a lot of folks. From a purchasing standpoint, you know, when everyone's in the office, you may be more concerned about how much is being spent on the P card. But when people are working from home, you want to know what exactly is it that they're buying, where is it being shipped to, is it appropriate, those types of things. So we got a lot of requests for how do we really dive into the analytics? Can you give us more information? Can you push that to our card issuing banks to so that we can analyze that information and make sure that things are appropriate, or put some controls in place or workflow approvals? So those were some of the types of things that we saw early on in the pandemic. But then with the supply chain issues, there were also people saying, maybe we can't rely on just one contractor for office supplies. Maybe it's good to have multiple avenues that we can buy things and get them quicker. And if it's out of stock here, then we can go here. And so those are some of the things that we saw early on. So some interesting innovations in the procurement world, where maybe it's a shift in not just having firm fixed price contracts to have everything in stock and negotiated pre-priced. Maybe you have that as your primary, but having secondary and tertiary suppliers to help step up in times of need as well was something that we saw quite a bit. But then as it relates to social responsibility, one of the things that I think, just to underscore how we started this conversation, is we had many customers come to us and tell us the importance of buying local and buying small. But it wasn't just lip service. We saw that when the pandemic hit, the companies that were poised to step up and serve their local communities were those local small businesses. They were often the ones that were the heroes that stepped up and helped out and helped state government meet the needs of that maybe some of these nationwide retailers couldn't in those situations. And so I think it was a great opportunity for some of these local small businesses to step up and to really shine and show that they can deliver when given the opportunity. And so those are some of the high level observations that I think I had over the last little bit. Sam, feel free to add any more if you have anything.
On the positive side of where Anthony began as well, just having more control or understanding of spending patterns of users on accounts. We've also seen a lot of requests for more ways to target spend, both for local, small, as well as diverse, especially over the course of the pandemic, as we've all understood greater gaps of how we can support those local businesses. You know, having admin who can set policies over accounts, either with us or not, but sort of be able to push initiatives on a larger account level, either by purchase group, time of year, maybe a campaign around Veterans Day and veterans-owned businesses, but really opening up those additional opportunities that e-procurement gives you to be a little bit more flexible, to be able to pivot with the data more readily.
Yeah, all very, very helpful. I mean, again, I want to bounce back to our state members here for just a moment. We've talked a lot today about, policy, rulemaking, the length of time that we know that traditionally happens. I have heard from several of your colleagues say that's one thing that I do hope will stick. that moving forward that we can maybe turn those wheels a little bit faster so that we can get some of these policies in place. But Todd and then Josh, what else might you say you do hope that changed because of the pandemic will last and continue on into the future? Anything specific?
I'll let Josh go for a second. I'll be careful what I say just right off the top of my head.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. So I think, yeah, you absolutely saw out of a necessity, a very fast procurement process to respond to immediate needs. And that capability was there before COVID for emergencies, but obviously never seen on that scale for that type of response. I think when it comes from a procurement perspective and from a technology perspective, what we see is we definitely want to be able to move at least with some level of speed that's reasonable to keep with being fair and transparent in the process. And then I think what else is important is an element of flexibility with that, because technology changes so rapidly. When you have a long drawn out project process of design, procurement, and implementation, the technology is already advanced 2 or 3 times by the time you're implemented. So we need to accept that technology is going to very much quickly change, and it's going to continue to do so. So we want to create models that allow us to take advantage of that, while still, again, being holding to those important elements of being transparent and fair.
And Pam, I think your original question is, what do you hope doesn't change? I honestly, I like the idea of going a little faster. I think government should not be on the cusp of really innovation in the sense of what we think of the private sector innovation that leads itself to speculation with the taxpayer dollars. So I think there's something to be said for we should be very adaptable, but we should let systems prove out and make sure that they're there. That doesn't mean that we can't have some test beds. And I know in Florida, one of the things that I'm very proud of what we're doing is we're trying to develop some additional sandboxes to where we can have people in the financial sector and even in the tech sector can try to innovate on a private side. And we work very heavily with the military. I talked about the veterans earlier, which is very near and dear to my heart. But we have a lot of military installations in Florida and a lot of veterans that are used to a very regimented, if you will, chain of command and bureaucracy, and finding a way to let them think creatively and basically bring new ideas while being in that sandbox, but yet still staying within the confines of, as Josh said, the transparency. And in the state of Florida, our sunshine laws, which all across the United States would look at them as being a Freedom of Information Act or open records laws, require that, mandate that. We literally have to respond within 5 days to any request for information, and that's whether it's bids or protests or if it's communications. So the public deserves to know how their dollars are being spent and if they're being spent in a wise manner. One of the ways that we've reset from that, though, is the value proposition rather than the lowest dollar cost. What is the overall value? What is the uptime? So now we're working on our contracts, especially with the new statewide law enforcement radio system, that we, as part of the new contract, we've gone from a 99% uptime to a 99.9% uptime. Some people may say 0.1% is not a big deal, but whenever there's 715,000 average radio transmissions on that system per day, that can be the difference between life and death for someone who that's their only way to talk back to their commander who get backup. So we're doing that across all of our procurements, and we're having new expectations. Anthony made a good point about which vendors are available and not, because the one you always went for may not be the one that's still able to run. And we deal with crisis every year with the hurricanes that we have to deal with and the weather events. So we built a good, robust supply chain around the weather events. What we have to do is now build it around the non-weather events, the things that we can't. And the growing trend will be the reliance on tech and the reliance on these building automations and these systems. Because if I have right now, all of our roughly 6.5 million square feet are heating and air are centralized under one opcon, where we can adjust, and it's reaped huge rewards, but it also creates huge risks. if that connectivity is there, not there, are we still able to maintain those buildings and the critical infrastructure that go with them? So service and reliability are becoming even more critical to make sure the uptime gets better because we're becoming more dependent on it.
Yeah, definitely. So let me circle back to Sam and Anthony. Similar question to you too. So things changed a lot over the last nearly 2 years. So what from the social responsibility and sustainability aspect do you hope will continue into the future?
I'll take that, and then Sam, if you've got anything to add. So one of the things that I really liked during all this that I would love to see stick is our state partners demanded a lot of the suppliers and actually shared a lot of their pain points. It wasn't so much, hey, make this button blue, do this, do that. It wasn't, the little things. It was big pictures and saying, like, these are the problems we're trying to solve. Let's partner with industry and figure this out. And they had extremely high standards for what they were trying to accomplish. And I think that's actually a really helpful thing when you've got a customer and an industry partner that are holding each other to a very high standard, because that's where innovation occurs. I hope that continues, where we've got customers that tell us exactly what they need. They're very clear, and they hold us to that bar, or find suppliers that will meet those bars. And I think that's good for everybody when those standards remain high. And so I think that's one of the key things that I hope sticks around from this, is just the speed, the innovation, and the high standard, and the communication and partnering with one another.
I'll add one to the mix just to close out that question. One thing that I hope is here to stay is sort of onboarding these offline relationships and making them more of a hybrid online, offline procurement relationship. It's really helped to expand opportunities both for customers as well as suppliers, expand a network of suppliers that maybe certain customers didn't have access to before, and vice versa, especially with growing those small and diverse businesses. So I really hope we continue to partner and bring those relationships online and give those multi-opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation today. We're getting near the end of our time, but I do want to ask one final question of all of our panelists today. I want to start with Todd and just go around as I see my virtual circle here. What's the one action step that you would recommend states take after today's conversation? What's that one concrete tidbit that you would like to give all of your colleagues on the call? So Todd, we'll start with you.
Especially as it goes to NASCA, is look at your data that you already have, and specifically around your human resources and your people. State government doesn't work typically without the people, and we have not designed for early warning systems that we are now seeing in the Great Resignation of the labor statistic numbers that are coming out. And if you're not taking a close look at where your people are and where you're finding your people and how you're engaging them, it's not just a matter of pay, it's a matter of fulfillment and which leaders are running in what area, as Josh says, getting people together for team building, because things have changed so much. I mean, we just literally had a few months ago a Halloween event here, which was the best turnout we've ever seen, because it was the first in-person event we've done as an organization. Checking in with your human capital and making sure that they're engaged and that they're not at risk. Because some of these are great employees, and federal government and state government both it's critical to have some longevity so that people understand how the system and process works. We need innovation without a doubt. We need new thoughts, but we also have to run the critical business operations every day. And I look to our maintenance divisions that even though we've automated a lot of our elevator services, I still need some people to know how that elevator was installed 12 and 14 years ago to get it back running. The same way with even understanding where some of our dark fiber is across the state, making sure that they understand how it was connected and why. It's not just because we've always done it that way, but we just at least need to know where those things are. So the best thing I would say, Pam, is check in on your human capital, make sure you know where you're at in your trends, so that you don't wake up one day and say, we don't have the people to do the job anymore, and we've got a broken human resource system to make sure it's implemented, because just like we're saying, computers can't do this interaction. They can't discuss the sustainability and the data analytics. Somebody's still got to program it. Somebody's still got to analyze it, and somebody's got to take it to, in our cases, the legislature or the community and civic leaders to advocate for why we need better systems or why we need to change and adapt.
Fantastic. Thank you. Josh, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of them that I would pass along is just recognizing how important perspectives are and starting there. Change can be very difficult, and it can be very challenging sometimes to get caught up in just sustaining and maintaining, or what we sometimes refer to as keeping the lights on. And we want to actually make the lights brighter. Sometimes maybe we want to even change how the lights work and provide better. But to do that, again, it sometimes requires just a bringing of the right stakeholders, even cross-organizational, cross-team, and just starting at first, say, well, how do you see this? And then just going around the room and getting perspectives out there and starting there. And I think that's a good first step a lot of times when you're trying to make big, meaningful, impactful change.
Okay. Anthony, and then Sam, we'll let you wrap us up today.
Sure. I think honestly, forums like this are fantastic. Best practice sharing, I think, is key for anybody's success, and partnering with people who have maybe addressed some of those same issues before. Relating to social responsibility, which is my area of focus, I would say making sure that in your individual states that you set and understand those goals, and make sure that vision is set clearly. You know, that can change from administration to administration. But I think it's important that you have simple, clear goals, and then knowing the metrics behind those that you should be tracking, what to track, and then what levers and tools you have at your disposal to help meet those goals, I think are very important things. And again, best practice and benchmarking can help across the states, because some states are further ahead in those areas than others. And so that would be my key takeaway.
So obviously, our team clearly talks about this a lot, because my number one tip was to walk away from today's meeting and set a goal. So whichever area, maybe you haven't gotten into yet, or seems interesting, or you think that there's actually a chance to get started in that area next year, just set a goal. It can be pie in the sky or realistic, but it gives us something to track against, get data against. I will try and be creative really quickly and see if there's another one I can come up with. Education out to small businesses. So whatever unique resources, systems you have in place, communication systems you have in place, maybe small business networks, getting messages out about, getting certified, options that are free, options that are less expensive. I would say from a citizen's perspective, that's going to be a really big next step and opportunity to continue growing those opportunities for citizens in your state. So that's my bigger one that's less developed than a goal. But again, as I said earlier, if anyone wants to talk about any of this more specifically, feel free to reach out. I would love to have those conversations, and I know Anthony would as well.
Well, thank you so much for each of your golden nuggets. That's great to share with your colleagues here on today's call. Well, let me again thank Todd, Josh, Anthony, and Sam all for being with us this afternoon to share your thought leadership around this critical conversation. There's so many ways that we could take data management and analytics. This has certainly been an interesting conversation today, and I appreciate everyone joining us. If you're interested in watching the recording, it will be up on NASCA's Knowledge Center, and that is at nasca.org. That will be up sometime late next week. You can find all of the monthly top 10 priorities for State Chief Administrator recordings there as well. So we thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in the new year. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.